Welcome everyone to our presentation on barriers and bridges, the impact of COVID-19 for students with disabilities. We're excited to work with you today. As you can see here, we wanted to make sure that you have this presentation and the article. Both of them were a collaboration between our two worlds in education, visual arts and special education, which are closer aligned than some might think. The presentation and the article will be available on the NAEA 2023 website, but we also have the QR code right here for gaining access to the article we're referencing as well. This presentation is a review of research, collaboration, learning, and learning by passionate educational leaders who want to identify what we could learn from art education from the unprecedented experience of COVID-19 from our most impacted students, those with disabilities. And we are those educators. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Lauren Dewar, a special education instructional specialist with Prince George's County Public Schools in Maryland. And my partner here is...
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Stewart, and I am the visual arts supervisor for Prince George's County Public Schools, and I supervise over 280 art teachers.
For today, we want to share with you some information that we learned from our research that we did for the article. So today we're going to go through a summary of what we learned, the findings, what we found, the conclusions, what we think, and applications, what you might be able to do. So before we share, we want you to have a check-in with yourself. Using these visuals, here's the check-in. When it comes to special education, which of these pictures represents your level of understanding? While you're viewing this on your own, this is your chance to choose your own adventure. Is this the bridge structure, the water, maybe it's the time of day or the scenery that speaks to you about your journey and learning around special education in the arts? Hopefully you found that kind of just a little sparkle in your thinking to get ready for what we're going to go through today in thinking about special education in the arts. Now what we're going to do is talk about a summary of where we started and what we learned. So we want to start with some information that grounded our thinking about the arts and special education. So I'm going to share about the power of law. So IDEA, that's the education law that supports students with disabilities. The reauthorization in 2014 emphasized that disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the rights of individuals to participate in or contribute to society.
And in the power of art, Neeson from 2008 shared that the creative process calls upon an individual's cognitive flexibility, abstract thinking, and spontaneous action and reaction, which empowers that a child's development through experiences in music and art can continue for a lifetime, always providing an avenue of expression that is personal and rewarding.
And given that information, we felt that it was really important to identify really how all students from all levels of service could access instruction around the arts because it's so powerful in their life. Now, during our research, while the majority of art teachers in our district instruct in schools with comprehensive education programs starting at that bottom level, with special education students, they would be in that resource support. There's also a variety of additional specialized programs for students with IEPs, including early childhood, self-contained, with grade level standards, self-contained with alternate standards, and targeted programs for students with autism, emotional disabilities or transition needs, and regional programs. The participants in our survey represented the full swath of the educational programs and levels ranging from early childhood, elementary, middle school, high school, academies, which go from K through 8, and our regional centers, as well as some of the central office support staff.
So in our informal study that we conducted that helped to inform the article that we wrote, we asked several questions of our teachers, of our art teachers. We surveyed, actually, I'll jump to the bottom. We surveyed about 280 visual art teachers, and we received about 33 responses from those teachers. We asked questions like about their instruction and understanding of their IEPs, their individualized education plans, 504s, and their ELL plans that were pre-pandemic. We also asked about the impacts of virtual and hybrid learning during the pandemic. And then lastly, we asked about the hopes for the landscape of returning to an in-person instruction. So this was all while we were in the middle of the pandemic, right at the beginning, and moving into that virtual and hybrid learning. And then we actually conducted a follow-up survey where we asked about the hybrid learning again, and the IEPs, 504s, and ELL, and what those plans look like, what the shift was to back to in-person instruction and what that looked like. And then we also asked what they needed some more information about. What are some professional development goals that they had that we could support them with? Since we bridge the gap between visual art central office and special education central office, we wanted to know what were some ways that we could support the art staff better. So we sent out this follow-up survey to the 33 teachers that responded the first time, and we got 22 out of the 33 to respond. So we felt that was pretty good. One of the things we found was after we surveyed the teachers, there were two teachers that we wanted to follow a little further into their instruction. And so we were able to zoom into their virtual learning classrooms. And so at this time, we want to thank Ann Vokes and Susan Howard, who allowed us to zoom into those classrooms to get some more information about what they were teaching. And they're both at regional centers in our school system. And Anne is on the left wearing a pink dress, and Susan is in the middle wearing her art teacher smock and in all blue. And then Lauren and I are on the right. So we really want to thank them for allowing us to come in. And so we were able to follow a little deeper, some collaboration with these two teachers and get a little bit more information for what this was like for them.
We really learned a lot from the educators that we worked with. And so we wanted to share some of the summary of findings that we found, both in doing our surveys and working with those art educators directly. So when we considered the arts and special education before the pandemic, even before the pandemic, it was challenging for art educators to have the understanding of the variety of needs of the many students across the school that they worked with, because they actually get to see all the students in the school in most cases, and or they're teaching multiple different forms of art. And so there's a variety of students that they work with. We found that credentialing and training to prepare to be educators was very limited in our state when it came to preparing to work with students with special needs. And that is definitely a gap in helping prepare our art educators to be the best that they could be for those students. Additionally, we found that collaboration existed for some art educators, but it was really inconsistent. Often the collaboration was mostly with paraprofessionals who would work directly with the art educators in the classroom. And we also found that that was very useful, and art educators were very open to those collaboration, but they shared that they needed more support and collaboration around serving their students with disabilities and even accessing the specialists that work with those students or make the plans for those students, and how that could work in their classroom to really make meaningful learning around the IEPs, ELL plans, and 504 plans as well. The pandemic brought on new barriers that we had never expected. And so we found that there's a lot of things that kind of missed the mark for us in trying to bring art to our students in general, but in particular for students with specific needs. There was some misses that the teachers identified with us. The access to materials, they really had to rely on the art packet that went home, if an art packet went home, and materials that were already in the students' homes, which again, that was actually sometimes the fun part for the art educators, is getting to work with the parents and find out what materials are actually in their homes. The access to the students, it was really limited in being able to model and provide individual feedback because of the virtual format. Sometimes it was really hard even to get students on camera, let alone getting to see their art. Access to the student plans. There was less access to the plans and less collaboration around them. Oftentimes you missed out on those hallway meetups or those informal times when you had a question and you could run into your colleague and just ask them, because we were not in the same physical space during the pandemic. And that leads into the access to colleagues and collaboration. It was a lot harder to get the questions answered. And honestly, just being in collaboration with our peers means we need to be close to them sometimes. And being on the virtual format sometimes actually limited our ability to talk to our colleagues instead of expanding it, because it was difficult to have conversation when you're on Zoom. You have to wait your turn. And speaking of Zoom, there were technology issues, getting the Zoom to work, having Wi-Fi available, having cameras to be able to show both the artwork modeling for students and being able to give the directions that you needed and monitor your students. There's a lot of things to juggle during that time. And being able to see the students engaged and also being able to give them that real-time feedback that impacted their assessments. It was really hard to see the process, but it was also hard to get the students to show their artwork and get it to show on Zoom, and a lot of challenges. But in the end, as you can see, we have some pictures of art educators really getting great results from their students and being able to show their work with a lot of supports. So we want to talk next about strategies that are going to bridge. And I'm going to actually start with how they made it happen. And it really has to do with that first one, joy. We needed a lot of joy to create and inspire our students when they were not with us. And honestly, their joy came through the screen. They were excited to see us, and oftentimes they were excited to create because they want that interaction. The teachers had a lot of resiliency. We made great learning experiences, even through the most challenging of environments. We had good connections with home. I know that was probably also one of our most challenging pieces, but getting to create art, we found that the teachers were sharing that during the pandemic, it actually inspired some family bonding and brought the learning process in a whole new way, because now the family was engaged and they could see how teachers were making the learning meaningful for their students. The creativity, we didn't have access to our normal routines, our materials. And so we were really able to celebrate the creativity and using whatever was available to create something new. And in that, we were also able to see like that the students and families really got creative with what they brought to the table, and that they saw new materials as being art objects, that they didn't have to use just the normal art materials, that whatever they had could be meaningful. And really, our teachers, our students, and our families expanded our toolbox of what we thought about learning. Learning took advantage of the strengths of the technology tools that we were forced to use. We had to learn quick and fast. We created learning that expands beyond our time with our students. We created a new way for families and students to work together. And we also found ways to use our tools in new ways. And we found expertise in new ways. And we learned a lot of new things. And so part of what we found was our toolbox expanded, but we then have to think about, well, what do we want to carry forward, and what maybe do we want to leave behind? So we want to bring some of the conclusions that came from our conversations with art educators. And so some of the things we learned, again, things we want to carry forward, are that we learned through this crash course that we were all put on about the many technology choices that helped increase access to instruction. You can see in this exemplar, many of the things that are on this slide. It kind of brought together a lot of the pieces that teachers shared with us. The intentional use of a combination of picture symbols, translation, especially for students that have another primary language, using visual steps and showing the materials, and real life pictures and videos embedded into the instruction. So the instruction doesn't just rely on when we're on screen, but the students could participate in it or go back to it and still get their learning and repetition of information without me having to be there. These things actually are just a few examples of how you know your students and increase their access and engagement in the craft of art. We also found that the use of some digital routines made planning and preparing for lessons easier. We learned that accommodations could look different during the pandemic, but that the time also highlighted the importance of understanding how the accommodations could look in the art classroom specifically. And again, this highlights some of those ways to incorporate accommodations in your art slides. And actually, the teachers found that it was really meaningful to have the slides and they could reuse them. It actually shortened the amount of time that it took to prepare because they already had created their slide deck and could substitute in and out important information. We had to be able to address also these things that we learned, that not everybody had gotten the same benefit of working through and learning some of these things. And so as central office staff, we also learned that we needed to bring the great learning that we learned from other art educators, bringing together so that all of the art educators could access information and get training on how other people were successful to build their toolbox if they didn't get the same supports. Both the students and adults found new ways of interacting with the learning, and some of this is moving forward, but then also with all the things we talked about, some things needed to be left behind. In particular,
Okay.
go ahead, my friend.
Okay, so some things that our teachers wanted to leave behind and make sure that they didn't carry forward with them is that they sometimes felt that they were using too many steps and that the students weren't able to follow along. So they were able to kind of decrease the number of steps. And so in the future, as they moved back into the classroom, they wanted to decrease the number of steps that they were using. The use of close-ended projects is something that we don't want to carry forward with us, to have more open-ended projects as we continue on, so that students can all show what they know in different ways. And it's okay that not every work of art looks the same. It's also okay that we expect that all students aren't always on the same step, that it's okay that they're in different places. So we don't need every child to be in the same place to be able to move on. Another thing we were going to leave behind is needing collaboration around student plans. They really miss that needed collaboration. So making sure that that's something that is continually happening, that they're able to collaborate with the educators in the building. And that it's also okay that students don't always create the highest level of work, that we don't have to make sure that every work of art is perfect and looks exactly how it needs to look. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how you can apply some of the things that we found and some things that you might do. Okay. So if you haven't been taking notes, here's your opportunity to take down some notes, because we're going to ask you to take some of our learnings and figure out how you'd like to apply it into your own situation. Oops, I went too far. So here are your 5 key takeaways, some things that we learned that we'd like to share with you. So these 5 key takeaways emerged as we were doing these Zoom observations and the surveys. So the first one is that integrating technology into instruction expands learning experiences when selected with intentionality and purpose. Lauren talked about ways that we can use that video and replay the video. So there are times that it is good for us to integrate technology into our special education art classrooms when it has that intentionality and purpose. The second is in our curriculum development. Our curriculum development needs to include input from a variety of stakeholders to incorporate and address the needs of students. So that is that it has multiple learning modalities, there's multiple accommodation choices, there is differentiation for a variety of students, variety of communication methods, supports for our ELL learners, and material modifications. As the visual arts supervisor, one thing I really learned is that as I am rewriting curriculum, I need to include special education staff in the review and writing process for that curriculum. So that was a big key takeaway for me. The third is on staff collaboration. Staff collaboration across educators, related service providers, and support personnel within the classroom around student needs, as well as expanding collaboration amongst our education peers to build their educational capacity. So more collaboration is needed. Number 4, professional development. This was a really big area for us in that we really figured out some ways that our teachers needed some more support. They need more training around tools, opportunities, strategies, and proficiency in addressing the varied needs of their classroom, so that they can have these key skills moving forward. In the state of Maryland right now, there is only one course that is required for teaching of our special populations for all our teachers to take to be certified. So if you are coming to be certified in the state of Maryland in visual art, there's just the one class that you have to take. And I heard loud and clear through the surveys and through talking to the teachers that they have not received enough training. There also is no currently a course required for working with students, ESOL students. So that's another area of growth for us. And then number 5, in-person instruction. One thing we learned that while it was important for a time, virtual instruction was unable to replace the need for direct in-person learning for many students across the spectrum of disabilities. And this truly emphasized the need for instructional decisions to be made on an individual basis. And so having that in-person instruction was extremely important. Okay, so here are our 5 recommendations. If you haven't written anything down, now's the time. So, number 1, we want to advocate for the use of micro-credentials. If you haven't heard of what those are, they are essentially little mini certificates that can be added to your teaching license. We have used those in the state of Maryland, and we'd like to see that micro-credentials be added for special education, ESOL, and differentiated instruction. And so this is something that a teacher can take multiple classes, maybe 3 or more, to receive this micro-credential. And then, like I said, it gets added to their teaching license. So another thing that we'd like to see is a higher increase of system level policy, and that we include the arts teachers on the creating of that policy. Again, I already talked about curriculum, so making sure that a special education person is included in the art curriculum, but not only that, looking at ways that the arts can be embedded into other curriculum documents so that our students can shine through their strengths. And so making sure that we look at how in reading language arts or in math or in science or in social studies, how can we include some of their strengths in arts and music and theater and dance into those curriculum documents and courses. Okay, the 4th one, adult collaboration partners. So utilizing the art teachers more to create accessibility through art. So more conversations and collaborations between the art teacher, special education teacher, and paraprofessional. And then the last one, equity and bias. So looking beyond cultural, racial, and gender issues, those are all very important, but also making sure that we consider hidden and visible disabilities that we are overlooking when designing our programs. So now what we'd like you to do is to do a little bit of journaling. So you're going to take a few minutes to look at some of the things that we've presented and look to see what are the ways that you can use your voice, your position, and your power to make a difference. And we'd like to think about it in a few ways. Okay, so you have the power. Just like He-Man says, I have the power. So you're going to hold up your imaginary sword and you're going to say, I have the power. So look at them in these 3 circles. What are some things that you can do yourself in your own classroom, in your own position? What are some things that your team can do, whether it's a team at the school or team at central office? What are some team goals that you can do? And then what are some, dream even bigger, what are some things you'd like to see your district do? And even I'd throw in your state. What are some things you think your state could do as well, like micro-credentials? So take a few minutes to jot down. You can pause the video here so you can jot down some of your responses. And we really wanted to thank you for being here. This is our contact information. You have our article. You can go back to the QR code to pull it up, or you can look on the NAEA site for this conference, and you can pull up our article that we'll have posted. We hope that you got a lot out of this. We hope you can take the article and use it to advocate for things that you would like to see change in your school or in your state or in your school system. So feel free to take down our emails and contact us with any questions that you have. And now we would like to say together, art
is finished.
finished. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.